Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica, or When I Feel Like It series, Retro Revamp Rewind, where I take a look at some of the videos from earlier years in my channel when I had less of an audience. And one game that I talked about back in the day was Offbeat Racer on the Hyper Neo Geo 64. And my opinion on this game has actually changed since I first reviewed it, so I figured I should really revisit it and make the Hyper Neo Geo even cooler than I think I already have, because people actually like it now. That's great. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But when I first took a look at the two Hyper Neo Geo racing games, and these are running on real hardware, and let me tell you, it is extremely difficult to get that to work. I'll leave a link in the description below of how I modified the hardware to make it work in my house. I was kind of ambivalent about these games. I enjoyed them, but compared to a lot of other arcade racing games on the market, I thought they were fine, but not great. I have played a lot more Offbeat Racer, and minus the fact that I went right into the wall there, the control's still a little touchy, I need to work on it. I've actually grown to really enjoy this game for what it is, because when I was playing it, I wanted it to be more like a San Francisco Rush. I wanted it to have bigger air jumps. I wanted it to be more intense. I was imparting a thought to the game as to what I wanted it to be, and that was maybe not fair because that's not what the game is supposed to be in general. It isn't San Francisco Rush. The shortcuts aren't as big. You get a decent jump there, and I did want more of those jumps out of the game. But as I've spent more time playing Offbeat Racer, it's become not one of my favorite arcade racing games, but maybe like top 15, and I see that SNK was really onto something with the racing genre, and I still just love how this game looks. I've always been partial to the Hyper Neo Geo hardware, and when I did the original series talking about that hardware in general, it was definitely cumbersome. There was like 13 different chips on the board just to handle 2D and 3D. It was a mess of hardware, but it was really fun to check out. And you'll see there I got through that first race by the skin of my teeth. The cars are definitely harder to control. That was one of the advanced cars. And if we go back to something a little bit easier, a track that's a little easier, it improves for sure. But like I said earlier, as I've spent more time with Offbeat Racer, I am genuinely growing to really enjoy this game, because when I first added these games to my collection, because I wanted to do the first full hardware capture series on the Hyper Neo Geo on YouTube, I actually thought about selling these two boards. And now I don't think I would ever let them out of my collection. I just love them that much, because you need to remember, this was basically the first time SNK had ever really dealt in full 3D. The MVS and AES were still on the market and would be through 2003, but the fact that this came out in 1997, SNK was still learning about what 3D was, and this being their first racing game ever made along with Round Trip RV, they were basically in development at the same time, so it's really hard to say which one may have come first. This is an extremely good freshman outing for a company that really had no idea what the hell they were doing with 3D. If you take a look at some of the other companies' first 3D racing games, they aren't as good as what SNK is putting up here. And I will say, as you learn these games more, as you play around with them, as you learn the different paths you can take, how that physics engine works for the racing, it really becomes a ton of fun. It doesn't feel as fast as some other racing games. Even if it's running at 60 frames a second, it definitely doesn't have the same cadence and motion, but the amount of cars you get in this game, the amount of options you get, is a ton of fun. It's slightly unfortunate it is limited to 3 tracks. I think that maybe adding 4 or 5 in total would have been great compared to just these 3, but I just love how it looks visually as well. This starting area inside of this like indoor courtyard, for 1997, this is definitely doing more than the PlayStation 1, Saturn, and Nintendo 64 could do, and the soundtrack is great as well. This is an original capture soundtrack, so it's going to be a little bit muffled because that's how it works, but go ahead and listen for like 30-45 seconds and I'll come back and re-review Offbeat Racer now that I love it more than I did when I started. But enjoy! I can't remember in my original review about 2 years ago whether or not I thought this or said this, but that sounds like a Castlevania track. I'm pretty sure Dracula is racing around this European town right now. But all joking aside, I do love the soundtrack in this game, and of course SNK was always great with the music. But this feels really fun. All the winding turns, all the jumps, all the cutbacks. You can see I'm not racing the greatest, and that's because I am still learning this game, and I did have to modify controls over. I actually played this game with a flight stick, because the steering wheel I bought to modify over for it wasn't functioning correctly. The dead zone was messed up, so I'm playing this with a flight stick. It's a disaster way to play the game. But there is a modification that a friend of mine did where he converted these games over to work with a GameCube controller. I've been thinking about doing it. If you guys are interested in seeing that, leave me a comment down below, because I was just going to do it off camera for myself. But if you want to see how that works and how you could potentially use it for other arcade games, leave me a comment down below. You'll see I ran out of time there, so I'm going to come back and try it again. But I just love this. The Hyper Neo Geo was a very special piece of hardware, even if it was a complete abject market failure, because SNK just crapped the bed, for lack of a better term, with this hardware. They just didn't know what they were doing with 3D, even though it looks really good. I love this, and I'm not sure why it didn't succeed outside of the fact that at the same time stuff like Model 3 was on the market. So when you put them side by side, you could understand how they would have a little bit of difficulty, because ADK, the company that worked with SNK a lot, helped co-develop this hardware, and neither company had ever developed 3D hardware before. And compared to using an off-the-shelf solution, this is full custom silicon to make this game work. Full 3D silicon, full 2D silicon, in-house design chips. So the fact that they were able to pull that off in and of itself should be commended. But this is a really fun arcade racing game. The odds of seeing this in an arcade now are probably zero. I haven't seen a Hyper Neo Geo cabinet since I worked in skiing, and I was at the US Free Skiing Open in Vail, Colorado, probably 17 years ago, and I saw Beastbuster Second Nightmare, a game I also own and have reviewed. I'll leave a link below if I remember, but I usually forget. If you see this game in the wild, play it, because you're never going to see it again. If you get a chance to buy this game and it's not too expensive, I do recommend it, although Offbeat Racer is probably the hardest of all 7 Hyper Neo Geo games to find. I got this one out of Japan on Yahoo Auctions. But every once in a while I do like to revisit stuff I talked about in the past, especially if it is rare and unique and I didn't have the same size audience as I did back then, because these are games that should still be celebrated. And Offbeat Racer is a great game. I've grown to love it, I've grown to appreciate it, I've grown to understand what it is versus what I want it to be, and that's probably on me for the original review. I gave it an unfair critique because it had jumps in it, and I just said I wanted it to be more like San Francisco Rush, and I probably shouldn't have said that. Short of that, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, that notification bell definitely helps us out. That way we know what you guys are interested in, and I can bring you more and interesting concept, because I am going to revisit some of the original videos on my channel throughout the year, and probably throughout the life of the channel, because there's so much fun stuff I've talked about before, and I love it so much I want to talk about it again. But yeah, Offbeat Racer, probably like a 7 out of 10 arcade racing game, and if you get a chance to play it, I highly recommend it. I got 4th, I'll see you guys next time, bye bye.